Oh shit. Here we go again.
Hey guys, it's TheFrXion here, Tank12, however to call me, I don't really care, and welcome back to World of Tanks. Today we're going to be continuing what we did with the 121B. Although we didn't really review the 121B previously, I wouldn't really call my video a real review of the tank, but more of a revisiting the tank. Because I think a lot of people know the 121B, a lot of people probably bought it with the bonds, and probably quite a few of them were a bit disappointed with the combat capacity that the 121B had prior to the buff that Wargaming released with patch 1.13. Today we're going to take a look at one of my dear tanks, a tank that is very close to my heart because of its brother, the M48A5 Patton. That is actually the tank that is really dear to my heart, but the M60 is really close to it because it's very similar in a lot of respect. But let's first take a look at the M60, compare it real quickly to the M48, at least visually speaking, and then we're going to talk a little bit about what was wrong with this tank and why it needed a buff. And then we're going to take a look at the characteristics, see what has changed, and we're going to have some gameplay, and we're going to finish it off with a verdict. So all in all, probably no longer than 15 to 16 minutes, hopefully. So the M60, as you can see right here, looks like an M48, but it's actually a revisioned M48. So they based the M60 on the M48, but they did work through it and changed a couple of things. First and foremost, what you can see right here is the armor layout has changed. The turret has become smaller, thinner, and is no longer as large on the M48. You can also see that the commander's cupola on top has gotten a nice 12.7 50 cal machine gun, probably a M2, a Browning, and you can also see the searchlight that we also had on the M48. But there's a very big difference. This tank now is really quick, and it's really fast. So let's take a look at how the M48 looks like in the direct. You can see right here, this tank seems to be a bit larger, at least it seems to be a bit wider, but the turret really is a lot bigger. You can also see that they went away from the rounded shape that we also have on the T110E5, the T110E4, or the T110E3, and then they decided to go with some angles. Now, big impact on the armor layout because the M60 is a lot lighter than the M48 and thus carries less armor. Well, they had to sacrifice armor protection for better mobility with the M60, but that mobility really does come to shine in this patch. Now, they didn't really change anything regarding mobility with the M60, so previously if you were playing the M60 you had the same mobility with this tank, but obviously with equipment 2.0 you have now the option to run the very nice turbocharger, getting you 10% additional engine power plus 5 kilometers per hour top speed, which gives you a top speed of 65 kilometers per hour. That is insane. Let's compare the statistics to the M48 real fast, and let's talk about the strengths and the weaknesses that both of these tanks possess, and that make them let's talk about why I really enjoy both of these vehicles so much. So we have the same kind of 105mm gun. On the M60, it's a 105mm, let's check, M68 gun, which is kind of unique to the M60 here, but it's basically the same kind of as the M48, but it probably has just a different, is a tank that was, you know, released after the M48, but actually it's the exact same gun. It's just, it's really weird that they don't show that with compatible vehicle, that it's the characteristics are exactly the same. So they didn't really change anything other than the survivability on the M60, but I think that is a really big deal. We'll get to that in just a second. So the average damage, average penetration is very similar. The only difference is the rate of fire. The M60 doesn't have the same rate of fire that the M48 Patton has, and I think that is good because there are some really big ups that the M60 has now that the M48 just doesn't have. You can see that we don't have a crew on the M48, so the changes, you know, in gun traverse speed or in aim time and dispersion probably has to do with the fact that my crew is not on the vehicle, because other than that, I think that my M48 would probably have an even better aim time than 1.58. 1.58 is pretty damn good nonetheless. So yeah, you can see gun traverse, all of these characteristics are very similar except for the rate of fire. Rate of fire is a bit better on the M48. So you have a very good gun, very reliable gun. You can do a lot of damage. You have heat shells or secondary shells. But now we get to the very good stuff. So the M48 is a tank that before the high definition patch, which I'm not sure, probably was 1.0. I'm not sure if they patched the M48 previously, but the M48 didn't have amazing armor prior to the patch where they gave every tank a HD remake. Now, since they gave the tanks a HD remake, they also fixed the armor. The M48 has 152 millimeters at the front, it has 254 millimeters on the turret at the front, and it has actually become quite a sturdy tank. With heat shells, the M48 actually does struggle quite a bit because it's quite flat, but if somebody's firing at you with standard shells, now with high explosive shells, you're probably going to be doing quite fine. The one big issue that you had with the M48 was the cupola on top, which still is a pretty big target, but that target is getting easy because this thing is just like almost twice as big as the M48's cupola on top. So you are going to have a big problem on your hand when you are playing the M60. So you can see that armor up there is very thin, 125 millimeters. And obviously, while the M48 is smaller, it's probably also not very thick. We can check it out real quickly here. It's only 80 millimeters thick. So, you know, balancing that is maybe just as difficult as balancing something on the M60, but at least it's a lot smaller and dominant on the tank. It's a very big target. So let's continue on with the comparison and let's talk about the real thing that has changed. So previously the M60 had really bad turret armor. The turret armor was still the non-HD turret armor that used to be the standard on the M48. But they now decided to give it the real turret armor to make it more competitive. So now we have 254 millimeters of turret armor, which is the standard that we had on the M48 now for a couple of years at least. And that's really good because all of a sudden this tank can go hull down, although it still has a very big weak spot on top of it. But it makes it a bit more difficult to take it out of the game, and it gives you more chances of surviving engagements. Now obviously the hull armor hasn't changed because the hull is a different hull from the M48. Only 93 millimeters frontally, 76, it's the same on the rear and on the side as with the M48. But the thing is just, 93 millimeters is not a lot of armor. That's really not something you want to work with. But you are really going to gain something else with this tank. You can see it weighs almost as much as the M48. Previously, prior in the video, I said something that it's lighter, but that's not the case. It just has a much better engine. You can see the engine has 1,045 horsepower. Now we probably have to subtract maybe 90 horsepower because maybe the average horsepower was 945 or something like that, and we gained 10%. But you can see that 810 horsepower that we have on the M48 Patton just gives us a max speed of 45 kilometers per hour. We gain a 20 kilometers per hour top speed advantage. That is massive. That is massive for a medium tank. That is massive for a Patton tank, because this thing has a really good really good gun. It has a great turret now, at least, well, if you can take away from the very big weak spot on top, you can still work with it, and that is really nice. With this mobility, you're going to be able to go into spaces that you would never be able to reach with the M48 Patton. So that's really great. You can see the specific power to weight ratio is better than on the M48. You're going to get up to speeds a lot faster than the M48. You're going to have a better top speed. You're going to have a better traverse speed. So that is really where this M60 shines, and that's where the M48 was never really able to, you know, hold itself close to. I'm sorry about the Steam notification. Hopefully the person doesn't write to me anymore, but yeah, we'll just have to get through it real fast. So concealment and spotting wise, it depends on if you have the crew on, if you have the right equipment. The M48 Patton that I'm currently running doesn't have the running like similar kind of equipment on it. I do have I think code as, oh no, actually I don't. The thing is, you don't really need coated optics on the Patton, because either the M48 is already 420, probably the same with the M60. Your crew trained, you can get spotting to 468 meters, but if you are running, if you still have a spot left, you can obviously run coated optics. But yes, that means the M60 is, in my opinion, is a lot more flexible than the M48, and now with the turret upgrade, it is actually going to be a lot more flexible in a lot of more situations. So all of a sudden, you now have the choice of, well, why don't I run the M60? Because the M60 all of a sudden is almost as good as the M48, because the armor that you are missing out on kind of can be substituted for the additional speed that you have. That is a huge advantage. Getting that 65 kilometers per hour with the equipment, obviously, you get an additional 5 kilometers per hour on top of that. And now I'm not saying that you cannot run the same loadout on the M48, but you will only be 50 kilometers per hour top speed. That's still 10 kilometers per hour slower than the M60. That's a big difference. 10 kilometers, but 20 kilometers per hour top speed on the M60. That's a huge difference. So hopefully you understand how important that is. Now we're looking at a very, very interesting tank, because with added protection on the turret, you can now get into positions, play very aggressively, and have an additional benefit of having some armor on the turret. So I'd say, without further ado, jump into a game. Let's talk about the mobility, talk about the strengths and the weaknesses of this tank. And in the end, hopefully I can give you guys kind of a perspective on if you should get this tank for bonds or if you shouldn't. So, as always, we'll be right back on the gameplay. So, let's take a look at the gameplay that we're going to be focusing on today. We are obviously playing the M60, and we're playing on Erlenberg. I'd say this is probably not the best setup that you can have when you're playing the M60, since there are quite a few tier 10 and 9 vehicles. There are no tier 8 vehicles, but still, I'd say this is still better than a lot of other games that you can have where there are only tier 10 vehicles. So still, you have a bit of a tier advantage against quite a few opponents. With the M60, what I really wanted to point out right at the beginning, but I kind of messed up, is that with the 65 kilometers per hour top speed that you have on this vehicle, that you just kind of miss on the M48, you are able to reach this position right here on the map Erlenberg, the middle part, very, very quickly. So if you get here, you can be really, really dangerous for the enemy team when you want to engage heavy tanks down this alleyway. Unfortunately, we do catch one from D100, but we managed to deal some damage to him as well. The big problem, though, as I already mentioned previously, is that the cupola on top is very big. It's a very big target, easy to hit, and you have to work with that cupola. So if you know that there is some kind of cover where you can put your right side of the turret behind like some kind of structure, you might just be able to bounce quite a few shots off your turret. But still, because this tank is not as well armored as the M48, I'd say you're going to be bouncing a lot less that you would be bouncing on the M48. Doesn't mean that you're not going to be bouncing anything, but it's not as well protected. But I think that draw of having less protection on your vehicle, but getting a lot more out of the mobility is really worth it, in my opinion. And I really like the mobility. I think now with the added turret armor, it just kind of is an upgrade to the M40, to the M60, and it's kind of a really nice competitive vehicle to the M48. Unfortunately right here, or fortunately for us, we first hit the Jagdtiger, but 2 or 3 shots actually just went all like over the place, and the last shot didn't hit the Jagdtiger at all. So RNG was having a really weird time right there. Now we have the T54E1, but luckily for us that RNG is working again, but something else is coming in. You can see that artillery has found us, and artillery is really interested in our tank. Still, unlucky for us, we get hit for about 700 damage. That's really a lot of damage. I haven't been hit by artillery that hard since the patch, but that has to be a good kind of, you know, a good kind of thing if you don't really enjoy artillery slamming you in the face. At least you see it now. I think having the perk might be beneficiary for you, so I might just maybe get the perk as well. Right here we have a really good position on the E100, a bit of a side shot, and we have a really weird obstacle in our face. But having this little window here gives us the opportunity to put on some pressure on this E100 and this AMX50B. And obviously if the AMX50B is running APCR, we're going to have a bit of a problem here. If he's not, we probably can bounce a couple of shots, but he just shot the right cupola as well. I think this time around he hit the sides of it, but he was firing premium shells. He does get punished quite a bit, and he dies almost instantly. In this second, we do take him out of the game. He was actually penetrated by a HESH shell from the FE215B, and that really hurt the AMX50B. So we were able to take care of the E100 and the AMX50B, and we've racked up over 4,300 combined damage. And you know, with the speed that you have, this real advantage in this game with the current meta, it's really nice. That's something that you are not going to be able to do with the M48. And I just have to say that I really think that the M60 now is a lot more interesting for me than the M48. Doesn't mean that the M48 is a bad tank. The added protection that you have on the hull on the M48, as well as the turret with a smaller weak spot, which is just a little cupola that isn't as, you know, aggressive as this huge commander's hatch with a 12.7 machine gun. That is really a big difference, and that can, you know, sometimes decide the game. Unfortunately for us, artillery does take one last pop shot and manages to take us out. And yeah, you could see that we weren't really hit often. We got hit by the E100, the AMX50B, and artillery 3 times. So your HP really will be draining if they are able to put something into your vehicle. And unfortunately for us, being the artillery target there wasn't very fun, but still we managed to do quite a bit of damage and win the flank for our team, and thus win the game. It was really important that we were able to push the middle, get some assistance to the middle right there where they were pushing the E100 and the AMX50B, put some pressure on them, put some pressure on the Jagdtiger. The enemy team didn't really play the 1-2 line at all. It was really important that we got the the Centurion action 10 out of the game really quickly, and thus we were just able to really steamroll through the middle and the west side of the map. And I think that's probably also because we managed to push very decisively, and that had to do with the fact that we finally had the mobility. And if I had done that in M48, I probably wouldn't have been able to do as well. I would have probably been able to get into the position, but it would have taken me quite a bit longer. We wouldn't have been able to take a shot at the Centurion Action 10. Then we would have had a really awkward engagement where we had to find some cover because the western side was wide open and they would have just had like a crossfire situation. And I think that's really important, and I think that's a great benefit of playing the M60. I was really aggressive in the middle. I probably could have worked my armor better if I had maybe taken a different route, but I think the mobility gave me the advantage to get into these aggressive spots, and I thought I was just gambling with my HP, and it did pay off this time around. Probably will not pay off every single time, but I just think that mobility gives you an added flexibility when you're playing the M60. Thus, I am a real big fan of the M60 now, because the only thing that they really changed with the M60, let's just go back before we got killed by the artillery so we can actually take a look at the tank in free camera mode. They actually only changed the turret armor. So the turret armor was upgraded, I think, from 130 millimeters or something along that line to 254, which is the same as the M48. You can see we did bounce a shot on our gun mantlet right there, and we also bounced another one somewhere from the T54E1. The thing right there next to the turret. And you can see that the turret does its job, but that really big port on top is a very big target, and it's very easy to take shots at them, especially if you're close range. But if you're further away, I think all of a sudden the M60 becomes a really nice tank, because you can get into positions where you're hull down, you have 9 degrees of gun depression, you're really fast. So if you get into aggressive spots, you're fast, you go hull down, you can, just keep your lower hull, your entire kind of chassis hidden from the enemy. They'll have to go for the pop shots on the cupola, and if you're, moving all the time, they really are going to have a hard time getting through your tank. Previously, the cupola on top, I mean, it still existed previously, so you still had the weak spot there, but they were just able to go right through your turret, and that's no longer the case. And I think that's really cool. So I really enjoy the new M60 because it's not overpowered. It gives you a really nice mobile and fast American medium tank that we haven't seen in a very long time. I think we don't have any American medium tank that can go above 50 kilometers per hour. So that M60 with that speed is really something special. So hopefully you guys did enjoy this video. I think the M60 is certainly a tank that you should be getting if you have enough bonds. If you like medium tanks that have a bit of pace to them, this is certainly a tank that is really worth getting. Just keep in mind, cupola on top is a big weak spot, and the hull is not going to be lasting very long. So you have to play this tank accordingly. But still, the mobility is a really big plus. 65 kilometers per hour top speed is great, and with the added horsepower that you can get with the equipment, this tank is really able to get you from point A to B in a really quick, I don't know, 2-3 minutes, max 30 seconds, I don't know. So, as always, hope you guys did enjoy. I'll see you guys on the next video. Until then, have a good one.